In this next component of the stapler tutorial series, we're going to model the bottom metallic plate down here at the bottom. It's got some interesting aspects to the modeling process, and so we're going to use subdivision surfaces to achieve this hard body model. Our start file contains all of the objects that have basically been completed with the exception of this component that we're about to model. Let's come over to Profiles, where I have some starting objects that are going to guide us in the modeling process. Along with this base object, we're going to derive geometry from that to start our object. So let's press the / key to go into edit mode. Let's select our primary object and do a zoom to selection. Let's zoom down to this front area. The model that I developed is based off a real stapler that I had, and I had this internal connecting component right here at the center of this upraised region. So let's select this, press Shift and S, do cursor to selected. I'm going to actually remove these because these just give us an idea about the extent of that upraised region. We're going to delete those. Come back here to this main outer object, Tab key, select this edge, hold the Control key and select the opposite one. That will do a pick shortest distance. Shift and D to duplicate that. Escape and then P key, and this will move it to its own object. Tab leaves edit mode, and we're going to select just this primary base object, and we'll just go ahead and hide that. Let's come back over here. Tab goes into edit mode, and then press the period key to set the pivot to the 3D cursor's location. Shift and D. Immediately press the R key to begin rotating. Hold the Control key to snap to 5-degree increments. We've got these two paths that we need to join together. Come into vertex mode, just press the A key to select everything, and then come down to merge vertices by distance, and it will weld these two vertices. Now press the F key to go ahead and fill that. Press the I key and come in about this far. So this is going to be the geometry that sort of raises up. Press the I key one more time, and we're going to put one more boundary right here. This is a planar loop region that will function as a boundary between this large flat area and the curving area. Now let's go ahead and come up to select or less and do more. And let's rotate the view, and we're going to upraise that just a little bit, about like that. And I think that's probably sufficient. Let's come in and let's zoom in over here, press Command R. We're going to add a loop right there and hit return. Let's come over to the shrink fatten function, making sure that we are in active tool mode so that we can grab one of the elements and just sort of move it up about like that. Let's rotate the view a little bit, back in edge mode. Let's come over to our friend, the bevel tool, set it to 2, but we're going to leave it at the 0.5 configuration. Click, hold, and drag, and then we're going to bevel about like that. We don't need much more geometry than that. And let's remind ourselves that this is that boundary region. When you're working on hard body models that have planar regions and curving regions, you're always going to want to have this in order to control the curvature, so the curvature stays where you want it to be and doesn't go into the flat regions. Let's go ahead and come into the top view. Option Z goes into X-ray. Let's select this interior polygon. Now the 3D cursor itself is actually down below, and we really need it to be at the level that we have it here. So Shift S, do cursor to selected, and you can see that pop up. So that's really important. Press the X key to delete that face, 2 key, and double click to select that boundary. Now we got to get some information from this boundary. So we're going to come over and turn on a statistics overlay, and it tells us that we have 28 edges. So let's turn that off. Go ahead and press Shift and A. We're going to add a circle, and let's make it 0.5 centimeter. And then we need to plug in that 28 value right there. S key, and we're going to scale that till we get down basically to my profiles. We need to fill it with the F key. That's important because if we don't do that, it'll cause potential bridging problems. Go ahead and hold the Shift key and click to select that open boundary, and then bring up the context menu and do bridge edge loops. Okay, there we go. Let's come back into the top view, select 3 key, select this polygon, I, do one more I inset like that, and then one more about there. Let's go ahead and G key, Z, we're going to drop that down, and then E key will extrude that down, and X key to delete that face. Come out here, E key will extrude those down. And then let's do some basic forming work here, some details. If we just subdivide this right now, it's going to be quite ill-defined. So we'll come over to our bevel friend. We make sure it's in the 2-1 configuration. Make sure that you're in active tool mode. Click, hold, and drag on any of the selected edges and pull until we add that constraining geometry. Let's zoom out. So now what we need to do is we need to extrude out so this planar region that comes out. So this was the uplift area. Let's come back into the top view. Double click the outer perimeter. So let's come back over here to select box, hold the control key down and deselect that half. Okay. I'm going to come back to the move tool and then press the E key and then X to extrude those out about like that. Press the period key and let's do bounding box for the pivot's location. S key, X, and then type 0 and click. Let's go ahead and pull this out just a little bit further like that. Okay, so that's going to be the beginning of this longer planar region. Let's come over and give this a little bit of thickness. Now this might pose some challenges, but it's all resolvable. So let's select that outer boundary, press the E key, and then Z, and we'll just pull that down a little bit. When we examine this, we've got these long, thin polygons. We need to produce a boundary around here, much like we had produced this boundary set of polygons between curving and planar regions. And we need to do the same thing over here, but we need to reconfigure this geometry to make it more predictable. So the first thing I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to have this. In fact, let's come into the top view right there and let's just go ahead and dissolve those edges. Let's come over and start reconfiguring this so that we can put that boundary loop in. We're going to focus on this area. Press the K key. In fact, I'm going to go into vertex mode. It's just sort of easier to see vertices during some of these operations. Press the K key, click here, and just generally follow that angle. But got to press C so it projects the cut all the way through and then click. And let's do the same thing here. We're going to have this very thin polygon, K, click, and then pull out about like that. C key and click. Okay. Now, we need to produce a boundary, a parallel boundary along here because we want a little bit of rounding right here. And we don't want it to be too thick. I'm just going to deselect because when a lot of things are selected, it just gets hard to see. Press the K key. I want to come right into the middle of this little edge. Hold the Shift key and that will snap it right there. Click, press X, pull all the way over and click and return. So I've got a nice thin boundary right there. Let's also come in and zoom in, press the Command R, Control R on the PC. Go ahead and put in that loop right about like that. Now, as I look at this, we've got this very thin polygon right here, and I think we can actually optimize that out. Select this vertex, hold the Shift key and select there, and then do a merge at last, and that will just sort of optimize that out. It's going to be such a small little detail it won't show up. Okay. Remember, when creating a subdivision surface object, our polygon structure needs to be a sort of patchwork. And so we want to press the K key here. Let's continue patching this. And I'm going to go from here, click, and then I'm just going to come straight down, making sure to press the C key so it projects, click, and return. In fact, let's zoom in. This angle doesn't need to be matched up exactly. K key, click here, come down to about here, and then vertically down. C key, click. And you can also continue this operation. Come up, right click, come here. Let's move over. In fact, this one can anchor right down to this corner point. You can see it's just pointing right at that, and then hit return. And then finally here, I'm just going to take this and angle that down. Let's come in and remove half of it because we're only working on this bottom half. So face mode, Option Z for X-ray mode. I'm in select box, so let's marquee around all of that. In fact, I want to make sure I've missed a couple, holding the shift key to make sure I've got those. Okay, X, remove those. I'm going to leave edit mode because I want to check. I actually have a rotation applied to this. Let's apply that rotation. So Command A, and let's apply the rotation to the object. Okay, Tab key takes us back into edit mode. Let's come over and add a modifier, mirror, and it needs to go along the y-axis right there. Okay, so that's good. I need to produce that boundary loop around here because you see I've got that bump going on and we need to produce that boundary. But if I press Command R and try and do a loop, it's going to come all the way down here, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to select these 4 polygons, press Shift and H to hide everything that isn't selected, and then we can press Command R, and we can put in a loop right there. Now it's going to ask us to slide, and as soon as I get to this side, press the E key, and that will switch us into parallel mode. Come in about like that, and click. Now press Option H to return all of those hidden polygons. Let's come down here, and we want to anchor this, so press the K key from here to here and return. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now we don't need to worry about this. We're anchoring to this triangle, but it's not actually a triangle. Remember, it's a quad. It's got 4 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we were to actually enable subdivision at this point, do you see it creates a nice flow right there? So this will work just fine. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Let's go ahead and look at this in the top view and return our attention over here. This is a little indent region where when the stapler operates, the staples kind of go into this dip area and it helps with the clamping process. So let's make that. Remember, we're only working on this 1/2. Let's come over and sort of, my eye is going to look about here. Press the K key, click about right there, and then come down here. We only want to go along the Y direction, so press Y, and then click and return. Let's come into edge mode and double click this new loop. Let's return over here to the bevel tool. Make sure it's in the 2-1 configuration. If you watch all my videos, you'll notice that that is a favorite configuration of mine. Click, hold, and drag, and we're going to pull out, but we're going to exceed the template lines a little bit because we're going to create the boundary loop between the planar region and the curving region. Click about right there. Let's come down here and select this edge and this edge. Let's press the period key and make sure we're at bounding box center. That's important. And then press S, Y, and then 0 to flatten that out. Select these, Shift R, and Shift R. And now let's come down and sort of work our way in. Let's select this vertex and move it there. And we'll take these and we'll sort of move it that way. And then S, X, and we'll pull in just a bit like that. So I'm just very roughly forming that, but I do want it to make sure that, again, it's outside of this profile. Let's come here, S, X, about like that. S, X, and then finally here and here, S, X. Yeah, that's good. Now we need to anchor this area. So I've talked about planar regions, and one area that you want to be really careful of is a condition like this. I have said before that you can have n-gons within the polygon mesh that drives the subdivision surface, but this is one condition you always want to avoid. It is an n-gon that backs in on itself, right? That's concave. So we need to come over here and dice that up. Press the K key, click here to here, return, and we'll do the same thing. Let's switch over into vertex mode to make this a little bit easier to see. From here to here, just press the J key and it'll connect the path right through there. So that divides that up really nicely. Remember, we're working, all of this is a planar region with boundaries between the areas that change topology. So we have a lot of latitude and freedom with how we work with our polygon structure, but we did definitely want to take care of that. Now we want to come in fact, I'm going to take this, I'm going to move this in just a little bit like that, just to sort of distribute these a little bit more, a little bit better. Okay, now we want to create a loop here and here because we need to create geometry that we can indent a little bit. If we press Command R, you can see that the geometry is going to flow outside of that region, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to come over here and press the K key, click here, come to about here, and then click there. And now when I press Command R, it stops there because it's like a fork in the road and it doesn't want to make a decision about which fork to use. So click return, Command R, click and return. Now watch this. If I take this vertex and I move that down, we've formed a loop, which is something that we're always wanting to try and achieve in subdivision surfaces when it comes to topologies that are changing. We don't care so much what's happening in this region. So now we want to come in, let's select all of this geometry. We need to produce a secondary, the boundary inside of here. So press the I key and we're going to inset a little bit like, about like that. That's good. But it's also created this geometry at the symmetry point. We'll just go ahead and repurpose that. That's actually going to work okay. Now, when we zoom in, you can see something is a little bit off here. We've got symmetry, but we're not seeing the symmetry on this side. So let's come over here to our symmetry modifier. Let's first move it in the stacking order because we want it before we apply subdivision. And the merging right here is where the problem is, the tolerance. So let's take this to 0.01 centimeters. That's the distance between points. If the points are within that value, it will merge them. And we don't want that to happen. Okay, so let's take, and I think I want to take this loop here. Let's sort of move that out just a little bit more like that. In fact, I'm going to come over, press the Tab key. This profile was great, but it's sort of getting in the way now visually. So let's go back into edit mode. Let's come back in and take all of these interiors and let's move them down a little bit like that. Deselect these two and we'll pull these down a little bit further. And then here in the middle, I'm going to take that one and I'm going to pull that one down just all by itself. So we have that nice dip. That's where the staples go down and it helps the folding of the staples area. So that's done. One thing that we want to pay attention to now is the fact that we have all of these control loops in place, and we want to control the curvature of the subdivision between the curving areas and the flat areas. So we're going to look at that next. And we've got all of these intentionally modeled boundary regions, with the exception of these. These aren't boundaries, but we've got them there. We have the boundary loop here. We have these very thin boundary loops here, okay? And these are serving the purpose of preventing curvature from going into this flat area. But they're not going to do it all by themselves. If we turn on subdivision, we'll see these lines appear, and this boundary here corresponds to this edge loop. So what that means is that we've got subdivided geometry from this thin polygon that's being pulled all the way over as far over as that boundary. And that's actually going to produce subtle curvature into this area. We don't want that to happen. So we come over into edge mode, select this edge, And this is where we do an edge crease. So you would just come up into edge, and then you would come down to edge crease, and you would begin mousing, and you see that boundary beginning to move, and it snaps into that parent boundary where edge crease, you want it to be 1.0. If I press the N key, that value shows up right here in mean crease. That's very important for preventing that subtle curvature and shading from moving into that flat area. So we can do the same thing here if we come around. Now we've got forks in the road, so the loop select stopped at this area, which is okay. Now we go ahead and press Shift R, which repeats that last edge crease command. We can see those snap into place. That just means that the subdivided geometry, if we look at this in without optimal display, it just means that these subdivided child polygons aren't passing that boundary. Keeps the curvature and shading exactly where you want it. This is one of the most important things you can do when you're doing hard body modeling. So there we go. Shift E, and we'll begin pulling those and snapping those into place. And let's do the same thing in here. Now these are smaller, so these aren't likely going to show up too much, but we'll just go ahead and do it anyway. Shift R to repeat it. And down here in this trough, I actually want this to be a hard edge. So let's take a look at this. Option Z takes us into X-ray mode, and I'm going to very carefully select that loop going around. And we also want this to be a hard edge. So this is going to do the same thing. So Shift E will begin pulling. You can see that those will eventually snap in to become hard corners. Now, when we turn on shading, we're going to note that as soon as we enable smooth shading, that we get curvature there again. So we've got surface normal blending that's happening at these 90-degree angles because the shade smooth applies smoothing to every angle between every polygon. There's no limiting. And we're just going to take care of that limiting on this localized basis by bringing up the context menu and then in edge mode doing mark sharp, and it will break that surface normal blending at that point. So we have these hard angles. So let's come back over to wireframe. Let's go ahead and turn off or turn back on optimal display. We've got one final area to crease, and that is right here. So we've got these long irregular sized polygons blending into these. So let's double click. In fact, I'm going to just hold the Shift key down and deselect. I don't have to worry about that one because it's this size and this size are so close to each other. Okay. Shift E, and we'll begin snapping that into place, and that is taken care of. So now the only other final location that we want to control is right here. So Tab key, double click. So we've got, well, the double click goes too far. So let's just do this. Let's just manually select it. It's only 3 edges. And Shift E, and we'll pull that into place, and that controls that really nicely. There we go. So now let's take a look at that. Smooth. We have a very nicely controlled subdivision object so far. Now our next thing is to add a place for these 2 screws. So let's come into the top view. In fact, let's come over and turn off subdivision surfaces. Just disable it for interactive purposes right now. Let's zoom down here to this side, which is the one we're working on. I'm actually going to just move that right on to this existing edge. So let's create a cutout for that. So I've just re-entered polygon edit mode, and I want to press K key, come right to the center here, and I want to create a cut right along here, but I'd really like it to be exactly perpendicular to this line. So there's a neat command here. Press the A key, and then press the A key a second time, and it goes into perpendicular snap mode, and then I can click here and return. So we'll do the same thing over here. Press the K key, again, click here, come here, A key a second time, and click. Let's come over into vertex mode. Shift S, cursor to selected. Press the Tab key and let's add a new polygon mesh. I want it to go right here into the stapler collection. So Shift A and then Mesh, Circle, and let's make it 0.1 centimeters, pretty small. And then we only want it to have 8 segments. S key scales it back up a little bit, about like that'll be good. Press the Tab key to go into edit mode for this new mesh, and we want it to match up to these 90-degree angles that we went to a bit of pains to put into place. R key takes us into rotation mode, and then press the B key, come here, and then rotate until it snaps there. So that ensures that we have these vertex points exactly at these 90-degree angles. Okay, leave edit mode. And just remember what that object is. Let's come back into edit mode for our main primary object. And then we're going to reselect that, come up to mesh, and we're looking down through the projection axis that we want. That's important. Then we come down to knife project, and it will cut that into the geometry for us. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that, or we could delete it. And then press the I key. We want to produce that boundary. There we go. And then produce I one more time. And this will get inset down into the object. Now it looks to me like maybe I need to increase the size of this just a little bit. So let's expand the selection out. I really want to scale it out, but I don't want to scale it up in any way along the Z-axis. So press the S key and then tap Shift and Z, and that will do like a radial scale that won't scale along the Z-axis. And that allowed me to sort of pull that out just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Let's come in and sort of finalize this geometry. We have this condition where we've got an n-gon here that kind of backs in on itself. So remember, that's something we want to take care of. Press the K key, click here, and come to there. So that splits that into 2 polygons, and we'll do the same thing here. K key, and we'll anchor that there. And then here, K key, we're going to take care of these really obvious anchoring points. And then here on the inside, well, let's do this. I'm going to click here, here, and then I'm going to anchor right over there. Let's do sort of the same thing. Click, click. Remember, we're in a planar region, so we have a lot of freedom with how we sort of rework that. But, you know, we're still left with 2 n-gons here. So let's do this. K key, and I'm just going to create quads there. So we quad, 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 quad. Okay, and then one final here, K key, and then we'll do this, and I'll just anchor that right there. We need to remember that we've got this boundary loop around here. So let's come into edge mode, and immediately, so if we turn on subdivision, we can see it, the irregularity of that. Shift E, and we're going to snap that into place, and that will preserve all the flat area with being flat. Now let's come into these areas here, select these, and then E key, we're going to pull that down, and then X to make room for our screw right there. In fact, let's come into edge mode, and let's really add some fine detail. We're in 2-1 configuration. We'll just pull that in like that. This is going to be very small detail, but let's go ahead and double click here. In fact, it really gets to be kind of challenging to see what your geometry is doing when subdivision is turned on. So let's just come over here to mean crease and add that to 1. Command R, and we'll put one more loop there, and then we'll set its crease to 1. So once you get used to doing this, you just know where to put the creases in and the cuts, and you don't have to wait to sort of look and see what's happening. Okay, so there we go, and then we can turn on subdivision. We can look at our mesh. So I'm going to stop the tutorial here. The rest of the plate is just creating another cutout here, and then an end that is basically not going to be seen. It's going to be off the camera area. We could press backslash to leave isolation mode, and then we would just come back in and turn on the base. So you see it would be just a matter of extruding out some other edges, creating a cutout like we created here. But that is the bulk of the process for creating, turn on subdivision for that, this metal plate for the stapler.